Let's look at this objectively, too. This idea of rights as a United States citizen, these are really just constructions of the mind. There's no such thing as an actual right. It doesn't exist outside of some axiomatic kind of philosophical principled belief, right? I have the axiom that I have inalienable rights, and so therefore I have them.
Disagree, but there's a correction here. Government enshrined protections are not real. Rights that as we know them, are just things that we recognize as things of value to us. So for instance,
welcome to the Freedom Unchained channel. I got a good video for you guys today. Two uneducated people about law arguing about what rights are. On the Tim Pool podcast, you have Tim Pool and his guest arguing about their beliefs on what rights are. And if you follow this channel, you know I explain what rights are all the time. Because I have a feeling that 99% of people have no idea what rights truly mean. They use the words all the time, but they actually don't know what the word means. That's one reason why I tell everybody to get a dictionary and start learning what words mean. Don't assume that you know what a word means just because you've heard it and you've been taught a meaning in school. It's probably wrong if you've been taught it in the indoctrination camps. So I'm going to let you guys watch this clip from the podcast, and you guys can determine who's closer to the idea, the correct understanding of what a right is. And then I want you guys to give me your definition of what you believe what rights is or rights are in the comments, and we'll get a conversation started about that. And then I'm going to do a follow-up video breaking the video down. Then I'm going to give you my understanding of what rights are from my point of view, what I believe from my studies in true law. That's what I call law, true law. God-given rights, God-given law, I guess you would put it. What this country's justice system is based out of, not these made-up rules that the government wants you to believe that are laws, which they're not laws. But what this channel teaches you is true law. And I hope you guys go to the description and find my link to join the Sovereign's Way Club. That will actually help you more understand what laws are and what you can do as a man or a woman to take back your rights. And for you to help people in your community to learn what true law is. That's what we need to do more and more in this country to help stop communism, because it's running rampant, and the majority of things that people believe are communist ideas, even if it's coming from a good place in their heart, like trying to help people. But the moral foundation of this country has been eroded away by these communist ideas, and we're about to have a presidential election, and one of the candidates is the last straw to break the camel's back to help completely turn this country over to communism. And that's one thing I cannot see or allow to happen. That's why I do this channel, is to help spread the word on true law and get people to actually start practicing true law. Because that's the one and only way we can actually take this country back, is through the power that we were given by the founding fathers that helped secure our rights under God and the ability to govern our own country using true law. And I believe this country is the only country out there that was built in a certain way that will actually foster and allow freedom and true law to spread across the world. It has failed to do that so far because communism, the idea of communism is so strong. To be able to manipulate people and destroy people's lives without them even knowing. But my ranting's getting long, so I'm going to let you guys watch this clip. And don't forget to comment. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out the link in the description. Join the Sovereign Way Club. Take back your freedom. And if you want to get connected with me, there's more links down there for you to do that as well. I hope to grow this channel as I'm back. And let's just get to it.
Right.
So when we're talking about war, what people need to understand is, for the most part, we are trying to be gentlemen. When you hear these stories and it's like, well, we only engage military targets, this is gentlemanly, but it's not real war.
No.
Real war is going to be like what we see in the Middle East with ISIS, when a suicide bomber runs into a daycare or something and just knows they're going to hit them where they're going to hit us, they're going to hit our allies where it hurts. Barack Obama Here we go. You ready for this one? Killed Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, a 16-year-old American citizen, in a drone strike in Yemen. We are not at war with Yemen. The drone targeted a civilian restaurant. It killed more. My understanding is more than just Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, who was a 16-year-old from, I believe he was born in Boulder, Colorado, lived in San Diego. The official response was they had been targeting an al-Qaeda leader and they had bad intel. It was an accident. I don't believe that I don't believe that for a second. Anwar al-Awlaki, his dad, was also killed in a drone strike, and this man was an American citizen. The argument that was made by the uniparty establishment was that Anwar was an enemy of this country, was a jihadi rallying people to fight against us, and therefore he was an enemy combatant. Mm-hmm. There's an argument there. I say that's a tough one. That's tough. There's an argument there. The Constitution still protects that someone who is an American citizen will get charged, will get a trial, and not just be blown up in war. If, however, someone is actively in a combat zone and they're attacking you, I don't think such a premise is reasonable. That being said, I don't believe for a second the killing of a son was an accident. I believe, in my opinion, purely my opinion, the Obama administration said, we're going to send a message to Al-Qaeda. We're going to send a message to Iran, kill his kid. I believe that the Obama administration intentionally targeted a civilian restaurant in a country we're not at war with to kill the child of a jihadi, so that all of these people would know the United States is not above killing your children if you fight against us, sending terror to all of them. There's another famous story that we were listening to recently where Donald Trump sent some guy a picture of his house. Was it? Are you familiar with this one? You guys remember this? I don't know what it was, but so he I think it's a Taliban, and Trump's negotiating, and Trump says, send him a picture of his house. And the guy says, why do you send a picture of my house? And he's like, you have to figure that one out. But there's a point that we know where you are, we know who you are, and we have the power to get you. There's a lot of questions about the killing of Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. Why did we bomb a country we're not at war with? Why were we targeting civilians? And how did we accidentally kill this guy? I think it's unreasonable to assume those are all accidents. I think it's actually simple. Barack Obama said, make sure they all know the price you will pay if you raise arms against the United States.
Sure. But let's look at this objectively too. This idea of rights as a United States citizen, these are really just constructions of the mind. There's no such thing as an actual right. It doesn't exist outside of some axiomatic kind of philosophical principled belief, right? I have the axiom that I have inalienable rights, and so therefore I have them.
Disagree.
Okay, and we can get into that in a second. But to finish my point, okay, based on this, we kind of suspend them all the time and then kind of pretend like we don't. We let cops be judge, jury, and executioner in many moments and kind of excuse them from it. If there's something which is going on that's in such a state of emergency, we'll suspend the constitutional rights of people in a moment's notice. We'll send the Japanese to internment camps. We will do all of those things because we've done it. We'll suspend your constitutional rights in a second if we think we need to, which, by the way, that would be my argument for how I know rights aren't real anyway. But we will, and we just kind of excuse it.
But there's a correction here. Government-enshrined protections are not real. Rights that as we know them, are just things that we recognize as things of value to us. So, for instance, I usually define it as simply, you have a right to speak freely. If you're in the middle of the woods and you're buck naked, you can say whatever you want. You have a right to keep and bear arms. Pick up a stick, sharpen it, pointy stick, you can defend yourself. Ain't no one going to stop you. The question is, when you get into conflict with someone else, where is that line drawn? So the reality is, rights are recognized as things that we can and must do to survive and maximize potential.
I think rights are force, and I think that...
You think rights are force?
Government
rights are
protections.
What do you mean rights are force?
You're talking about government protections.
No, I'm talking about period. I'll explain what I mean. A right, to me, is an entitlement absent duty. That's a right. Okay, you're entitled to it, but you have no duty.
What does that mean?
It means that you have it. So, like, okay,
entitlement to speak.
Yeah. So, if you have a right to own a gun,
To speak.
no, hang on, let me finish. If you have a right to own a gun, do you have a duty to own a gun?
But do you have a duty to speak?
No, you don't
start
have a
with the
duty
First
to
Amendment.
speak.
If you have a right to vote, do you have a duty to vote? The answer
right.
is
So
no.
it'd be an
That's
entitlement.
that's your argument.
It's an entitlement,
But
absent a duty.
but you can speak.
Yeah, you can.
And so
Until you can't.
The question
until somebody stops you with force.
So you're talking about government restrictions are made up by us as a people.
Just people can adhere to your rights without any form of government. If you're walking down the street and you speak, and a guy turns around and smacks you in the mouth and breaks your jaw, right? He has now used force against whatever this right you think you have to speak. You have no right to do shit except whatever you can enforce. Right. Your mechanism is force, and the mechanism against you is force.
And so
all rights are force.
You're talking about government protections, not rights.
No, I'm talking about rights. What is a right?
So
What is it?
it is an intrinsic moral function.
Well, okay,
or
intrinsic meaning what?
it means if again, I'll try to explain. If you're born and you live in the middle of the woods, there are things you can do. You can hunt for food. You can defend yourself. You can speak freely. Now, what we've done in the United States
Unless
is
you're born blind and you can't talk, right? Then where does your right to speak come from?
you lack the ability to speak,
Right.
but you still have the means by which you are allowed to do it.
Yeah, but what makes it an intrinsic right to be able to do? Like, where does this idea come from other than you axiomatically kind of just
Evolution?
say because I can do something, I have the right to do something?
It's part of a evolutionary biological structure
So
that
if I-
resulted in the survival of humanity.
So if I like grab a spear and I can stab somebody with it, I have a right to?
no, that's
Why?
that's attacking
different.
somebody. That's
Yeah,
violating.
but other
that's a
than
whole
an
bunch-
axiom of you shouldn't do that because I just don't feel like you should, what makes it intrinsic that I don't do that?
that you don't go and kill another person.
Yeah.
So the way I view rights would be things that, and again, there's a debate over what rights are.
Yeah, let's start with that. What are they?
No. So there, it's honestly difficult to define,
Yeah.
but it is certain moral structures or.
I would
things
say
that are-
axioms. Would you agree with that? Just an axiom. So, like, you have inalienable rights from God according to the Constitution. This is an axiomatic principle. It means this is our like philosophical starting point. Is that we have these.
I would put it as things that were required or greatly beneficial to the survival of an individual that we greatly benefit.
I agree.
Like,
I agree. We
it's-
benefit. I just don't know what makes them intrinsic, or like you're born with them, or something like this. Other than we just kind of agree to it.
So I think the restrictions we kind of agree to. And some people might view some things as rights and other things not as rights. Like the left thinks healthcare is a human right, which makes literally no sense.
No sense.
But in terms of your ability to speak, you can walk around, you can speak, to defend yourself, you can pick up a stick, you can defend
But
yourself.
this goes back to the same argument. I can grab a spear and murder somebody. I can do that. Why don't I have a right to do that?
Because you are now causing harm to another person, which is a
Yeah,
detriment.
but why
to
is that valuable?
human-
Why are
overall-
other people
so
valuable?
Yeah, well, why would that be an intrinsic value? So, like, I can
One
envision
would
a
result in the
planet,
end of
for
humanity,
instance-
and one results in the expansion of humanity.
Well, no, both can result in the expansion of humanity.
Right, but absolutely not. You're completely wrong.
No, I'm completely right.
You are wrong. Self-defense can result in expansion of humanity if you're using destruction for the purpose of ending something that is destructive. But if you are wantonly going around murdering people, you're actively reducing and harming humanity.
Well, okay, but that doesn't mean
So it
that
doesn't-
you couldn't expand humanity by harming people. There's
So
nations
the argument
that
of
do this all the
self-defense
time.
is there are things that we believe we must be able to do for the betterment and survival of humanity.
Yeah, but when I'm asking you this question, right? I'm asking the foundation from which you say I have the right to speak or write.
We
or
need to be able to in
things like
order to
this.
survive.
You because you need to do something.
So
I'm not sure how that means you have a right to it though.
Okay, so speech is not
Like you have
just
to
saying
eat.
words.
You have
Speech
a
is-
right to eat.
Yes, 100%.
Really? You have a right to do that?
Why would you
Yes,
not
you don't have a right to own
that?
So if
food,
I had-
but you have a right to eat, otherwise you'll die.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Do you have a right to breathe? What about breathing?
These are good questions, right?
Again, I don't think you understand. We're talking about intrinsic behaviors that are required for survival versus the government and humans deciding what we shouldn't have.
I
on
don't think we're
laws.
speaking past each other. I'm asking what makes them intrinsic. When you say I have a right to eat, okay?
If you don't, you'll die.
If you have if that guy has all the food over there, you no longer have a
We
right
are
to
not
eat.
talking about your right to steal from others. If you
Yeah,
are
so you
standing
no longer
in
have
the
a right
woods
to
by
eat?
if you are standing in the woods by yourself, eat that mushroom.
Okay, got it. You can eat the mushroom.
Uh-huh.
But what makes it a right to eat that mushroom, and what makes it not a right for a guy standing next to the mushroom to say,
Okay, we're
I have a
talking- you're talking
gun
about laws?
and I don't want
Okay,
you
wait,
to
hold
eat
on.
that mushroom?
You're now once again talking about laws and restrictions.
Yeah, okay, but my whole theory is that rights themselves are force, and that's all they ever are. It's just your ability to use force to do thing you want to do.
I think you're just making
you call
an
that a
argument
right.
about- I call rights things that are essential to the survival of humanity.
So you have a right to your heart beating and your blood flowing and to blink and to.
Yes.
Okay, so if you
So
just
now you misunderstand because once again you're talking about government again.
how is this government? It doesn't need to be government.
If you are standing in the middle of the woods and your heart is beating, your heart has a right to beat. If your heart fails and you die, you died. If you're making an argument that someone should or should not be allowed to do something is an entirely human social construct.
I agree.
Right. I'm saying that the reason we have protections of rights is because we've determined certain things are required for the reasonable survival and expansion of humanity.
I
These
agree. We
things-
agree to those things, and we act as though they're rights.
And the Bill of Rights,
but I don't think rights themselves exist.
The Bill of Rights is a recognition of certain things that we do for the betterment of survival that must be protected from government. Now, if you want to argue the amendments in the Bill of Rights are nonsensical, fine. If you want to have a moral argument or philosophical argument about what is required or intrinsic to the survival of humanity, by all means have that argument. But rights do exist. It just means some you might not agree with and some you might think aren't. Those are philosophical debates.
Yeah, but when you say exist, right? Do you mean outside of your brain they exist, or do they only exist as a construction of your mind where you say, I have a right to do X?
If we observe creatures in the wild, we will see them required to do things to survive.
Yeah, okay, so
if you inhibit those things, they will die.
So if rights
protect
to you,
those things.
So the rights to you just mean things which are a requirement for your existence?
And typically we define them as such because they transcend the basic obvious things like breathing and drinking water.
Owning a gun isn't a requirement to your existence.
No, defending yourself is.
Yeah, but
if a bear comes and you're in the middle of the woods and you don't have the ability to defend yourself, you cease to exist and humans cease to exist. So humans do defend themselves. Then as human society, we've decided this should be protected. Otherwise humans will cease to exist.
Yeah, but why? Okay, but this makes no sense, right? So if all right is to you, Tim, is thing X, which is necessary for the survival of a man, in this case, blinking and breathing and eating and, pooping and whatever, the right to poop shall not be under, because you have a right to do that because it's like something you need to do to be alive.
Right. But you can't poop on someone's floor.
Why couldn't you extend that to literally everything? You need healthcare to survive. You need guns to survive. You need a house to survive. You need everything to survive.
I think we should move on, but I think the challenge is, I don't know if you're unwilling to understand or what. You have no right to take other things from other people, to take their labor. You have no right to force a doctor to perform surgery on you, but you certainly have a right to ask him for it.
Those are just assertions. Like, you just assert these things as though they have a grounding epistemic foundation from which you can make the assertion. Based on where do you make the assertion that you're not allowed to do X other than because Tim Pool's preference is that you don't?
And I'm literally saying you're talking about laws and social order right now, not human behaviors for survival.
I think human behaviors are laws and social orders. I think that's this. You're saying the same thing.
No, if a person was in the middle of the woods, they'd be foraging and looking for food.
Yeah, what does that have to do with what I just said?
You're talking about what the government can and can't do. I'm talking about what humans need to do to survive.
Yeah, okay. Well, humans also have to have other humans around to survive.
And so this is communication is essential. The right to defend yourself is essential. The right to secure your possessions is essential. These things, without them, humans cease to function properly. And then you get the Soviet bloc, you get starvation, you get genocides.
It's also just it's a function of our belief system in the United States that we have natural rights. I mean,
I agree with that.
That's a huge part of it.
I agree with that. I agree with that, that in the United States, we agree that we have them.
I think you can
not
say that
sure that
everyone,
we do.
I think that you can say that everyone has these rights, and it's a function of whether or not their government allows the rights to be recognized.
That's the contention. When you say, I think everybody has these rights.
Yeah, that is my belief.
Yeah, it's a belief.
Yeah.
Based on
existence. I mean,
based on just your preferences.
So
I don't think it's a preference. I think everyone has a right to breathe. And
you do. In the big picture of what are the list of fundamental rights that exist to humans, cultures debate these things wildly, but there are a small handful which are true and correct. If inhibited, a person dies.
Agreed. But what I'm saying, I guess my overarching point, and I can just kind of tie it off
society
with this,
fails.
Is that when I say rights are forced, what I'm saying is the thing that you say is necessary, breathing, eating, these types of things. I think that those things, which you call rights, really are just force. You're saying I will use force in order to do this thing that I want to do to necessarily exist. And that another person can use force to stop those things from existing.
And then you can use force to stop them.
Right, and then you can use force, et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
but all we're really doing is just moving the goalpost of force around, right? So if this group says this group does not have the right to breathe, they do not have the right to eat, they do not have the right to do any of this shit, and they go and put a stop to it, what are we appealing to for why it is that you can't do that?
That group doesn't have the right to do that.
Yeah, but that makes no sense. Why wouldn't they have the right to do that?
I feel like
saying might makes right, which is
it's beyond that. I think you're making a postmodernist argument for why you should be allowed to do things that other people don't want you to do.
I think I think the opposite is true.
I
would use a justification of God. And I would appeal to something which is unchanging and an unchanging standard for moral justifications for oughts. But what you're doing when you say a right and you're appealing to like the Constitution, that's postmodernist subjective standards of nonsense, right? It's just like
no, it's moral
we
foundation.
all decided that we have these rights, so we do. There's no justification for any of them.
So
Zero.
you don't believe in any intrinsic moral foundations?
No, I do believe in intrinsic moral foundations and epistemic justifications and ontological justifications, which would come from God.
I think you're doing deconstructivist reasoning to argue why.
It's just basic philosophy. It has nothing to do with deconstruction or postmodernism. Basic philosophy, you have to have a justification for a position.
And when I've given you one, you just reject it every time.
Well,
You just say,
because they're axiomatic. So you haven't demonstrated why the axiom or the starting point. We start with rights, Andrew. You haven't demonstrated why we do, other than because I observe that if we don't act in this way, you expire. But it's like, okay, but why is that even bad? Like, why is that even a bad thing?
Why is it bad that humans cease to exist?
Yeah, why would that even be a bad thing from the worldview of rights? Like, oh, okay, if you don't have this right, you die. But you haven't justified why that's even a bad thing.
Because humans exist through a pattern of evolution towards, or creation, whichever you decide, to be fruitful, to bear fruit, and etc. These things are components of creation and life. I think this aligns perfectly with like a Christian, Judeo-Christian moral worldview. And I think these things are requirements for the efficient expansion and fruitfulness of humans. So they are natural. Either from an evolutionary standpoint, humans developed to inherit certain requirements to function efficiently. And when these things are curtailed, we see inefficiency and collapse, disease, and chaos.
This is circular. So you go, okay, we need to bear fruit and multiply. Why? Well, because then we can exist. Why do we need to exist? Because then we can bear fruit and multiply. Okay, but why? Because then we can exist.
You're just being contrarian for no reason.
No, it's not contrarian. I'm giving you a real principle.
You believe in God?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
So if I say God gives you a mandate,
Christian.
so when God says has a mandate to be fruitful and multiply, do you say yes or no?
Yeah, of course.
Are there certain characteristics and behaviors that result in benefit and in more efficient, fruitful multiplying?
Of course.
That's
divine, but this is divine command, justification from divine command. It has nothing to do with libertarian nonsense of constitutional egalitarianism.
I think instead of having a discussion on the merits of what rights might mean, you're instead upset over what libertarians think rights might mean, as opposed to what I'm actually trying to say.
Okay, well, do you justify rights as coming from God?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, then we're fine there. But so I think we actually agree. So then if that is the case, if whatever you think rights are come from God, then whatever else we're appealing to external to God for where a right comes from isn't really a right, right? It's not really a right.
I think that life, goodness, creation, there is deep overlap. I think a simple way to look at it is, yin yang, within good there is some evil, within evil there is some good. Mm-hmm. And a way to explain that is sometimes we have to destroy to create. What does that mean? If there's a mass murderer who's murdering children, we don't want to, but we stop that person to defend ourselves and others' lives. I think that there is divine mandate that we must, be fruitful, multiply. We are here to organize, to create. There's a secular way of looking at it. It's evolution that developed us into this point where we have internalized these things that we must do, or that result in a more efficient way of life. Or more simply, there is a God, there is a divine structure and mandate, which results in certain things that are beneficial to mankind that I would describe as good and just, and there are things that are evil and unjust.
So as we get to the heart of it then, right here, where we come to this agreement, where I reject this is that I think all the things you just stated are duties. They're duties. They're the opposite of rights. You have a duty.
I just think we're having a semantic argument.
Well, but semantics are super important so we don't speak past each other. So when I say a duty, it's an obligation to do a thing based on the fact that you're commanded to, in this case by God. A right, I would say, is an entitlement absent duty. So if that's the case, what you're listing out is like God is giving us these duties to do. I'm not sure what rights he's giving you.
I'm saying there are certain behaviors that God, that there are certain behaviors, there are certain functions of life that are a component of God's divine plan mandate. And I could argue it in a secular way for people who don't believe in God or whatever.
Sure.
There's a natural structure of the universe that says to humans, be fruitful and multiply. And these things are important for the efficient structure of such. That being said, we definitely should talk about Diddy, but I do appreciate it. I thought that was fun.
It was fun.
But I love the philosophical discussions, but I think the audience is like, I want to hear about Diddy. Okay, so...
All right, so that's it. I hope that didn't frustrate you as much as it frustrated me, because the answer is very simple. I'm not going to give you the answer right now. I have given it to you in the previous videos, but I want you guys to leave a comment, get a conversation started about what you believe rights are. Try to keep it as short and to the point as possible, because that's really the answer is a short and to the point answer. But I'm going to do a follow-up video to this. You'll find it in the description if it's created already by the time you get to this video. And I'm going to break down the video, their arguments, and why they're right or wrong. And please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video if you like the video. I'm going to try to keep creating more videos for you guys to help spread the idea of true law and how we can take back this country and spread freedom all over the world. Sorry for the audio problems. I'm still trying to figure out my microphones or my echo in this room. But please excuse that for now until I figure that one out. But I'm going to leave you guys with a ending clip from the podcast where a super chat man from the audience puts in his 2 cents in what he believes rights are, where they come from. Maybe that'll help clarify it for you, but once again, they still haven't got it right. Because 99% of people don't actually understand what true law is and the principles of law, which is sad. And I hope to help teach you guys that, or guide you guys in the right directions to find that answer out for yourself. So one of the places I like to guide everybody into is into the Sovereign's Way Club. It's a great resource for you guys to actually start understanding the principles of law and how you guys can actually implement and put to practice true law. And until next time, I'm going to leave you guys in the love, the light, the one infinite creator. Peace.
All right, clever username says, I think the foundation of Tim's argument about rights can be summed up this way. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights.
That's an axiom. That's axiomatic.
I believe that, I personally believe it is true that we are endowed with rights by God. And the purpose of those are to better allow us to be fruitful and multiply.
I believe that we're imbued with duties, which God commands us to do, and then gives us the free will to ignore them. But
Yes,
but I have not ever seen
I agree.
right. I've only ever seen what I can ascertain as being force. You do exist, but people can use force to take away your existence. You can use force.
Rights can be violated. My view is, call it duty, call it whatever you want. God says, here are pathways for you to fulfill my desires for you. You have free will, and other people will try to violate that. And you are faced with difficult challenges and evil. And then you've got demons, or whatever people want to call it, whispering in the ears of people to corrupt them. And then they seek to violate the divine path.
Well, I agree that I agree morality comes from God 100%, and that you have to use God as the basis for morality. That's where I would move, is towards some form of, it wouldn't exactly be divine command, but it's a simplified, easy version is divine command. I think we would just kind of agree to that. The idea, though, is that it's a command. The 10 Commandments were just that, commandments. You must do this. Your job is to obey, right? There's nothing I've ever seen which is a command from God which infers a right, and it's the same thing with Jesus Christ. I've never seen a right inferred. Only here's your duty and what you should do.
Here's a good one. Son of Chad says, would you banish the Hulk like the Illuminati did? It led to World War Hulk. Plus, it didn't work with Napoleon. What I would say is...
It did work with Napoleon.
What I would say is banishing Hulk not working is the construct of someone's imagination. So claiming it didn't work with Hulk is not a historical reference. Banishing the Hulk is actually a very interesting question. I know it's maybe silly, but the Hulk is it's a guy who, when he gets angry, he becomes an uncontrollable rage monster that kills and destroys. How do you deal with that? He's not intentionally doing these things, but still dangerous.
Yeah.